Hi, George here, and today I wanted to compare Photoshop Elements with Adobe Photoshop. Now, most of the time when people do this kind of video, they talk about how Elements is so similar to Photoshop. They'll show you the same tools and how they work on both sides, and I really don't think that that's the right way to approach this question. The real question is, why would you want to use one program over the other? And there are some big differences there on why you might want to make that decision. Now, the biggest difference is price. And most people tell me that they have switched from Photoshop to Elements just because of the price. And that's a very fair choice to make. Photoshop Elements is a one-payment program. You buy the program and you have it for life at that version. If you want the newer versions, you'll have to then repurchase the program again to get the newer versions. With Adobe Photoshop, it's a subscription service and you always have the latest version. It's constantly being updated. There's 2 or 3 major updates throughout the year. And every time an update comes in, it automatically is applied to your copy. So you always have the latest version when you're working with Adobe's Photoshop program. It's one of the reasons why I happen to like that program. I like that concept of it being constantly updated. With Photoshop Elements, if you want the updates, you have to buy the next version. That's basically Adobe's model for making profits from the Elements program, is to charge for the updates. Let's take a quick look at the prices and also see which program Adobe is pushing, and that's pretty obvious. Here we are at the Adobe website, and across the top, Creativity and Design. Here's your Lightroom and your Photoshop right there right at the top. Feature Products, there's your Photoshop right there. Notice that you're not seeing Photoshop Elements any place up here. You won't find it at all anywhere in the upper menu system up here. And that's because Adobe is pushing Photoshop. And the reason they're pushing it is that they make more money from it. That's fair enough. I'm not going to be faulting them for that. If you want to find Elements, you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the Adobe page, all the way down here, and there's a little link right down here, Elements Family. That's the only place you're going to find Elements here inside of the Adobe website. And they normally push the Elements over on sites like Amazon.com as opposed to pushing it on their main website. Now on the prices on this, let's first take a look at the Photoshop Elements price. This is the current price, and right now we're at the beginning of March 2023. Now it says $80 right here, $79.99. Actually, if you come down just a little bit, here it is, Photoshop Elements. Basically $100 for Photoshop Elements. So if you wanted to have the upgrade every year, they have a limited time where you can get the upgrade for about $20 off. But if we ignore that, you can figure about $100 a year if you always got the upgrades and you always wanted to stay current on that. We're not going to be looking at the Premiere Elements in here since that's their video program. We'll just focus on the photo editing program right here. So $100 a year if you always do the upgrades. Let's now take a look at the least expensive way to get Adobe Photoshop. Back over here, Creativity and Design, and Photoshop right here. And if we go up here to the Buy Now button, and here's the plans and pricing page for all the different Creative Cloud apps. And the cheapest that you can get Adobe Photoshop right now is on the photography plan at $19.99 a month. This gives you Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, Photoshop on the desktop, and iPad. So you get a lot in there, Photoshop and Lightroom, for $20 a month. So compared to the Elements, Photoshop runs about $240 a year as opposed to $100 a year for Elements if you're doing upgrades every year, and most people don't do that. So Elements is much less expensive than Adobe Photoshop. And again, this is the main reason why people will choose Elements over Photoshop. Let's now talk about the programs themselves and what they have and don't have that may be a deciding factor in choosing one program over the other. As far as basic editing inside of both programs, they're very similar. Here's Photoshop Elements. We're in the expert mode, which is the one that most closely matches Adobe Photoshop. We have our tools, left-hand side, standard tools. Right-hand side, we have different panels available over here. Right now I have the layers panel showing. You can do the effects panel, filters panel, and so forth, right-hand side. And both programs do a very good job of all of your basic photo editing needs. Take a fast look over at Adobe Photoshop, which is right here. Same thing. Left-hand side is your tools panel. Same tools, even have the same icons. They're in black and white over here, but they're the same icons. There wouldn't be any confusion if you went from one program to the other. Right-hand side may be a little bit more confusing, and that's just because Photoshop has multiple panels showing up on the right-hand side, not just one panel. The layers panel right now is right down here at the bottom. I have the color panel open up as well. You just hide that one. Here's the layers panel. All of these are quick links to other panels in here. For instance, here's the histogram panel. Right down here is the brush settings panel. We have our channels, paths, adjustments, libraries. So it's very easy to quickly work through the different panels over here. Here's our layers again. inside of Photoshop. So in a production setting where speed is important, it's actually easier and faster over here in Adobe's Photoshop. So if you're working in a professional field at all, then Photoshop is the obvious choice. If on the other hand, you're doing this as a hobby, you're just having fun with it, you're doing things for family and friends, then Elements is a perfectly fine choice for that. Let's take a look at another example in here. Let's take a look at the layer styles. Layer style, style settings, and here's the style settings dialog box. We have drop shadow, glow, bevel, and stroke. Each one of these has a few settings in here. Not a whole lot. It's fairly limited, but most of what you would normally use, the top choices, are all right here inside of the style settings dialog box for your layer styles. If you want to add a little bit more to this, you can go over to the styles panel, right-hand side, and then get a head start on these things with some of these styles here, and then adjust those styles from the layer styles dialog box. Over on Photoshop, same thing again, layer style, bring up our layer styles dialog box right here, and you can see it's far more advanced. So here's the bevel and emboss, we had that over there. Here's the stroke, we had that. Here's our drop shadow. We have inner glow and outer glow right here. There's a lot more available. And when you're in here, you have a lot more options available as well, including being able to change contours of the effect that's being applied. Okay, let's now talk about why you would want to use one over the other and why anybody would want to use Photoshop Elements aside from the price cut instead of using Adobe Photoshop. And that's very easy to answer as well. And that's the differences between the two programs. First difference, of course, it's a lot cheaper. Second difference is it's a lot simpler. And I happen to like Photoshop Elements because of that. Even though I have both programs, I do most of my work in Photoshop Elements because I don't have to worry about all that extra stuff that just gets in the way sometimes. It's too much. I prefer the simpler program. So all that's been removed here from Elements. If you don't need that professional level stuff, there's no reason to have it. It just gets in the way. Another reason that I like Photoshop Elements better than Photoshop is that it comes with tools to make this much easier to use without having to even get into all this expert level stuff. For instance, we have the quick edit section right here, where you can go through with your smart fix adjustments, your exposure adjustments in here, your lighting adjustments, color adjustments, and just choose from thumbnails to find the one that you want to work with. Much, much easier to use and a very fast, quick way to do your basic image editing. Your exposure, lighting, balance, and sharpening, and color options. If you want to do the fancier fun stuff, then there's a whole series here of guided edits. Basics, color, black and white, fun edits, special edits, photo merge. A few of these things are available if you know where to look over in Adobe Photoshop, but they're kind of hidden. But it's all here and easy to find inside of Photoshop Elements. For instance, object removal, real simple here, with a guided edit that actually walks you through the steps so that you can come out with professional level results without having to be an expert on the program. Just walk through this series of guided edits. So this is where Photoshop Elements really shines, is that it helps you along and it works with you. If you are a beginner or just hobbyist with photo editing and you don't want to become an expert or a pro, then you can do that level of work without having to have that level of expertise. So I prefer Photoshop Elements, and that's what I normally use on a day-to-day basis, and I do use it every single day. I also keep Adobe Photoshop. That's because of the things that Photoshop can do that Elements cannot do. Again, it's the differences in the programs that will make you decide to use one or the other, or in my case, to use both. One of the biggest differences is how the programs handle color. Go up here to Image, come down to Mode, and here are the color options. We have RGB color, that's the default, 8 bits per channel, which is fine in most cases. Index color, this is your GIF color mode. Grayscale and bitmap, which is just a straight black and white, no grays. Now, where does this come into play? Primarily if we're talking about professional print output. And that uses color dye separation mode, which is CMYK mode. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and K stands for black. So CMYK. And Adobe Photoshop can work in CMYK mode. So let's switch over there and go up here to Image and Mode. And here we go. The top section here, aside from the duotone, and you can make duotones over in Elements, so that doesn't really count. So aside from that, the top stuff is the same. And we also have the addition of CMYK color, lab color, multi-channel color, 8 bits, 16 bits, and 32-bit channels. So the options for color is far greater in Adobe Photoshop. And primarily, the most important part about this is for professional printing. So if you're going to be doing any kind of printing, whether that is images for a magazine or a book or album covers or posters, or if you are doing t-shirt designs, a lot of people do t-shirt designs. I also do t-shirt designs as well. And if you want to be doing that, then you have to be able to see how this works with inks printed on surfaces, and that's where the CMYK mode comes in. And that's the primary reason why I keep Adobe Photoshop, is for working for print output. So again, it isn't the similarities between the programs that are important for making a decision on which one to use. It's what your output is. It's what the differences are between the programs and which one can handle the output better. So the way I look at the two programs is, if you are an amateur, if you are a hobbyist, if you're just doing this for fun, or even if you have a small business, if you're only doing things that are going to be used on the internet, like websites and so forth, or you're doing YouTube channels, I do all of my YouTube thumbnails in Photoshop Elements. If that's all you're doing, then Photoshop Elements is perfectly fine, very advanced if you know how to use it. Obviously, if you watch my channel, we do some very advanced stuff in Photoshop Elements. If, though, you need a more professional level, you need all of the options, you also need things like CMYK color mode for printing, for actual professional printing, then the only choice is Adobe Photoshop, because it has those options available and Photoshop Elements doesn't. And if you want to learn more about how to use Photoshop Elements, I have a complete training course for that. And I also have a course for Adobe's Photoshop program. And both of those are linked down in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, click on share, click on subscribe. That really helps my channel a lot. And I'll see you next time.